All right, come on.
All right. Tuesday, October 1st, from 1 to 2:45 p.m. online via Zoom. Solid Ground presents Rent Smart, Breaking Your Lease. Do you need to break your lease to escape a dangerous situation? In this workshop, Solid Ground tenant counselors will go over 3 situations where you may be able to break a lease without liability. You've experienced stalking, unlawful harassment, domestic violence, or sexual assault. You've been assaulted by another tenant and they were arrested. Your landlord hasn't responded to a serious repair issue in a reasonable amount of time. They will also discuss what to expect when breaking a lease in other circumstances. Saturday, October 5th from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. at Meadowbrook Community Center. The North Seattle Home Fair Renting in Seattle lecture held by the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection. Whether you're a renter or a housing provider, there's a lot to know. Renting in Seattle provides information and resources on rental regulations, fair housing laws in the city of Seattle, as well as tips and best practices. Wednesday, October 9th from 12 to 1, online via Teams, the Seattle Office for Civil Rights presents How to Talk with Your Landlord. Effective communication with landlords can be challenging, especially when discussing repair requests, policies, or rent increases. In this free virtual workshop, you'll gain strategies for minimizing conflict and clearly communicating your needs. There will also be a chance to discuss how the Office for Civil Rights can better support renters in Seattle, at least at this moment. Wednesday, October 9th, from 3 to 4:45 p.m. online via Zoom. Solid Ground presents Rent Smart, Repair Issues and Landlord Duties. Are you having repair issues in your rental home and don't know if you or your landlord is responsible for fixing them? What exactly are your rights as a tenant and what are the landlord's duties? Learn how to request repairs, find out what the landlord is obligated to do under Washington State's Residential Landlord Tenant Act. On Thursday, October 10th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at El Centro de la Raza, room 311 and online is the Seattle Renter Organizing Council meeting. Join us for the October SROC meeting, where we will be working on areas of public comment, letters to council, and ways that you can advocate in the new Seattle city budget. On Wednesday, October 16th at 4:30 p.m. is sign up for public comment. 5 o'clock is the start at City Hall for the first 2025 Seattle budget public hearing. On Saturday, October 19th, from 1 to 2 at the Filipino Community Center, the South Seattle Home Fair Renting in Seattle lecture from SDCI. If you can't make it to the Renting in Seattle lecture at the North Seattle Home Fair, SDCI is present at the South End. On Tuesday, Wednesday, October 16th at 5 p.m. at City Hall is, wait a second. Sorry. Something was up. I lost my date. There we go. Tuesday, October 22nd, 5:30 p.m. online via Zoom is RAP King County Regional Call. The aim of the Resident Action Project is to provide a statewide network of people who are directly impacted by housing and homelessness issues, who are leading the charge for social change. You can gain organizing, advocacy, and policy skills by attending this monthly regional Zoom meeting on the fourth Tuesday of every month. Wednesday, October 23rd from 4 to 6 at the Forum at Town Hall Seattle, which is 1119 8th Ave in Seattle. Solid Ground presents Minding the Gap, Poverty, Homelessness, and Restoring Our Broken Mental Health System. In this social justice salon, they will explore how our community navigates the intersections of poverty, race, culture, social emotional well-being, behavioral health, and homelessness. Human service providers have long understood that behavioral health access is essential for communities to thrive. Barriers to accessing culturally competent care have led to agencies embedding services within their programs through partnerships and other initiatives. And Wednesday, October 23rd, from at 6 o'clock online via Zoom, is Be Seattle's October Building Tenant Power Workshop. We're not sure exactly where we're going to go with that. We're going to see how the budget goes so far. We may have a update on that, but as soon as we know, we will get that information out and you can register early just to make sure that you know what's going on. And on that note, whoops, flipped ahead. I'm going to stop sharing and introduce BJ. We are joined tonight by BJ Last to present a primer on the upcoming Seattle City budget process, how to read the budget, advocate for things important to you, including renters' rights. BJ is a business analyst and former professional baker with over 2 decades of budgeting experience across a wide range of industries. He's an organizer with the Solidarity Budget and Ballard Mutual Aid. So it is all yours.
Oh, howdy, y'all. So will I start sharing things? So yeah, it's very much the current. Actually, first before I start, as we go through, if you have questions at any time, drop in the chat or just come off mute, whichever you're comfortable doing. I will say if you do drop them in the chat, I might not get back to you immediately because it's hard to see chat when doing screen share. But otherwise, have at it. So yeah, and questions, participation, really, really welcome. Otherwise, it's me talking for a while, and that's, much less fun. So talking about the budget. So let's go do a quick sort of starting off with a bit of an overlap. I think we all know this, they're pretty much out in here in Washington State, there are 4 levels of budget. We've got federal, state, county, and the city. I just did some random circling to show that between city, county, and state, there's a lot of overlap in what are the big funding sources for them. With sales tax across all 3, because our state is so wonderfully regressive with its tax structure. And then we got property taxes also across all 3. And then B&O tax, which is a tax on sales by businesses. This doesn't mean we're actually really taxing big business. It's about the same size as sales and property tax. And just a little overview of what gets funded at each one. And then just to give an idea of what's the different scale, because we talked about here are rough estimates on things, what that looks like, because the numbers are hard to grasp. If you put all of them on one bar chart, you can see federal, you can barely see state. If you ignore federal, the differences you get from Washington down to Seattle and King County, and you'll probably notice Seattle and King County are about the same size. So a quick bit on scale. Also now a fun thing as we talk about this, budgets, they are very intentionally vague in a couple ways that we're going to go over. They don't really want us looking into this, which in some ways, this is an act of protest, resistance, whatever you want to call it, because they don't want people actually going and looking into this. They don't want people digging into stuff. So one of the first ways that these are vague is trying to see where things are going. If you took a fake, if you look at any receipt from anything you do, you can see an easy breakdown of what you bought and then just sales tax. We know this funds 3 levels, what's going to the state, the county, or the city. Figuring out the split between the state and then the county and city combined is actually relatively easy. There's a link there if you're ever curious. Trying to get this bit split out between county and state is I actually gave up after 2 hours or so of digging around. I just okay, this I can't figure it out. I'm just done. So this is intentionally vague, and also if you do run into something, and this will come up at times, really, you'll be looking at it oh gosh, why can't I figure out this thing? It's not you. It is designed for you to not be able to do that. So just something to keep in mind as you go through and sort of start getting kind of frustrated on things. Okay, also a quick note, everything we look at, with stuff from Seattle's budget, is prior year budget. I think probably everyone here knows that the mayor released his proposed budget yesterday. none of this is updated for that. Just kind of didn't have the time and didn't want to sort of do a mix between the two. But this is a big question that comes up a lot. Of the city of the Seattle, how big is its budget? And so like on the total level, last year it was 7.8 billion. I think it's like 8.2 now of like total funds. But the general fund is what really matters. And that's only about 1.7 billion. I think it's like 1.8 now, or 1.8 billion now. The big difference between that is like the difference between that's 1.7 billion and that 7.8 billion is restricted funds. Whereas the general fund is the stuff, the dollars the city is free to spend however the heck it wants. Restricted funds are, as their name implies, they're restricted. Like they can only be spent on certain things. Like Seattle has publicly owned utilities. So all of your utility payments technically are feeding into this those total fund or into the total budget. Like that's part of like Seattle City Lights money, Seattle public utilities. And so with these restricted funds, there needs to be a change to legislation for them to be spent differently. And who can change that legislation varies. So on like the utility payment piece, it would have to be a change, I believe, at the state level for the city of Seattle to start using like city light rate payments or public utilities rate payments on something else. Whereas Jumpstart, aka the payroll expense tax that has been in the news a lot ever since it was passed in 2020, when it was passed specifically to fund new affordable housing, new Green New Deal, new economic development, aka EDI, and some other economic stuff. Uh, the city itself of Seattle can change legislation on that. And they've done that every single year. This thing, Jumpstart has existed to actually change the spending a bit and use that to balance the general fund. With this year, they're up there to being like over half of it. They're trying to transfer to general fund. So I say that just to like restricted funds, yeah, they can always be moved because legislation can always be changed. But it's a much bigger and harder thing to go and do it. So you're trying to figure out like how big is the city of Seattle's budget with what we've got to look for. Like this 7.8 billion total dollar number is really, it's meaningless. It's kind of pointless, doesn't really impact. What we're looking at is really the 1.7 billion general fund, because that's what can actually be freely moved about between different things. Yeah. And so where does the general fund come from? So again, we talked about it's really just there's three sources. It's property tax, sales tax, and B&O tax. Like those three are like 67% of the budget. As you can see, there's just like a ton of other stuff that just makes up like everything else. And in fact, for 2024, 5% of it was what they were rating from Jumpstart. So from that tax for affordable housing, Green New Deal, and EDI, like 5% of like what they took from there was 5% of the total general fund. And a very, very, very important item for Seattle, and this is not unique to the city of Seattle. This is pretty common for a municipal budget. It is absolutely positive, like it has to be a balanced budget. So, the money that goes out has to equal what comes in. This is really important because it's whenever someone talks about, oh, they want to, talk about how something's like an end or I'm sorry, like a yes and, like, no. Like the way our budget is structured, it literally is either or. When someone decides that they're going to spend a dollar somewhere, that dollar can't be spent somewhere else. And we have a very limited pool of dollars. Like that 1.7 billion of general fund, like that's coming in the door. That is all that is available to go out. Which, of course, the big caveat, we could change the general fund at any time by passing progressive revenue doing other items, but that's a different item. But like with what is existing, what is here, dollars in have to equal dollars out. Uh, yeah. So a few small exceptions, like there are a few like rainy day funds, but generally like dollars in have to equal dollars out, how it works. Where does the general fund actually end up going? Because like this is the real number. Uh, quick breakdown on everything. It's really cops, fire department, and HSD stuff, human services department. And just like a fun one that I tried putting together at one point, this is off of 2024. If you want to look at like all of our carceral spending, like cops, courts, cages, it's actually 36.4% of the general fund. And that's actually even a bit of what you call it, an understatement. So that doesn't include stuff like sweeps, security guards, or legal settlements for what we call it, legal settlements for actions by SPD, because that's that the city's paying out. And looking at quick chat, yeah, pretty much, Kate. Like that was the setup, even under theoretically like a progressive council, that it was still this heavily going in that direction. Okay, so now another big part of how vague budgets are the timelines. So like this actually even happened in today's budget presentation by sort of like the mayor's office to city council. They talked about how the budget started back in January, which, yeah, that's just how it happens every year. From January through pretty much the end of September, the mayor's office is working on the budget really in secret. And what's happening is the mayor's office is talking to all the city departments. They're submitting things to the mayor's office. They're working out that proposed budget. The one and only thing that is publicly available at this time is there are two revenue forecasts that are done. I believe it's in April and July. And these revenue forecasts, they determine how much money the city will have to spend. Because at the end of those forecast meetings, the city will go and be like, okay, we're adopting this outlook scenario. And that outlook scenario uh, comes up with what that general fund number is going to be, the amount of money that the city has to spend. So pretty much the mayor's budget or proposed budget, because the council can throw it all out, is based off of a revenue forecast from July. Pretty much. So that forecast it was sometime in the month of July. Can't remember when, but they came up with like, okay, here's our estimate as to what we think would be revenue under like three different scenarios. Combination of the city and the mayor picks a scenario, and then that scenario determines how much money will the mayor have to spend for that proposed budget. And again, like those two revenue forecasts, the only visibility that people have during the first 9 months of the year. The visible process starts once that happens. And as you can see here from their fund calendar, it runs a grand total of 9 weeks. So that's a whole lot of time. It creates a massive sense of urgency and does not give people a ton of time to go and look through stuff. So the schedule that we're looking at is, we're right here on Wednesday. We had sort of that first presentation Friday through next week, through next Wednesday. Departments are going and presenting to council that they're going to come in and be like, pretty much doing a sales pitch for their own budget is about the best way I can think to put it. If you're wondering on SDCI, they're actually, I do not believe, going to be giving a presentation because they don't actually have every department come in and do a presentation. And then about 2 weeks later, there's that first public meeting. So you can see the amount of time from when the mayor transmits his budget till till that first public hearing is about 2 weeks to get through. Well, actually, I guess maybe it's more like 3 weeks. Pretty much a 1,000-page document. So again, it's kind of intentionally to keep people out that way. And then I mentioned on the last slide how there were like 3 revenue forecasts through the year. The last one comes out on the 22nd of October. And that's going to be really big because that's what ultimately determines how much money the city will have for next year. So what can happen here is that presentation can happen and they'll be like, cool, good news for next year. We now just suddenly got effectively a windfall of like $15 million free because this is like 15 additional dollars that isn't allocated anywhere. So council will get to go and figure out how they want to spend that. The exact opposite can happen though, where at that meeting, they can come in and be like, hey, we got a bad surprise. It's actually about $15 million less to spend next year. So what the council now has to do is find $15 million of cuts to what had been proposed. In addition, then figuring out what items do they actually want to go and fund. Because what the mayor puts forward is only a proposal, like the council can throw it all out or make as many changes as they want. And then on the 30th of October, the council finance chair, which is Diane Strauss, puts together what's called a balancing package. And that is pretty much Dan Strauss's proposed budget. It is back to being a balanced budget, but that's then the new starting point. And then council members can put forward amendments to that then end up getting voted on. So it's pretty much the mayor sends a proposed budget, their presentations, the finance chair, head of finance does their own proposed budget. Council members propose amendments to that proposed budget, and then council members vote on those amendments. And again, that's all done in 9 weeks. So a lot happening. And just sort of like a really bad visual of how compressed this entire budget period is. You know, here we've got a view of a full year. This tiny bit is all that's open to the public. Like everything back here, we have no idea what's actually going on. Taylor.
Yeah, I have I think it's a quick question. So during this 9 weeks, when do we as community members and organizations get a real say in? I see that it says public hearing. Do we get any real say, or is it like it has been on deaf ears for score and soap and soda and surveillance? Is it testimony style, or is it like truly public comment and with real present, like listening?
Uh, that comes down to different, I'd say it depends on different people's view of these council members. The amount that it would be listened to, because it is what you first mentioned, the public comment one of going and getting 1 minute to 2 minutes to go and speak on that. And so like the 2 dates for that, there's the 16th of October and then the 12th of November. And what I will point out with that like 12th of November one, as you can see, like that's after there was already a deadline for amendments. So that largely comes down to what's like already been put forward. There are a few other like additional ones where they are doing opportunities for public comment at the start of like each time the color on the calendar changes is about the easiest way to put it. So like this for Friday, there'll be a public comment at the period at the start. There won't then be for like the other, what are these, yellow, orange days this week? And then similarly with these red days that they'll be doing it. So those are the more public ones. The amount that they will listen move is debatable. There have been things in prior years that really have come up off of this, like the 20 million student mental health from last year was something that emerged during the budget process as just an item that came up. Kate.
Sorry, my internet connection is a little unstable, but I wanted to note, Ashley Archibald reported on Twitter this morning that Dan Strauss said that public comment time will go like this: 0 to 30 speakers will get 2 minutes, 31 to 120 speakers will get 1 minute. If there are more than 120 speakers, the first 120 will get 1 minute and the rest will get 30 seconds. And I asked her if that also applied to the public hearings, because the public is supposed to get as much time as we deserve, and she didn't know. So I'm assuming that it does apply to that as well.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Kate, because yeah, there is also like a difference between, so public comment is technically optional in a so meetings with public comment scheduled, it is technically optional and council can end it at any time. As we've seen them do, a couple times, so far this year. Public hearings, uh, hearing means they have to actually let everyone who signed up go and speak. They can do things on the amount of time, but everyone who has signed up does have to be allowed to speak, whereas comment, they have the opportunity to end. And thank you for mentioning that, Kate, 'cause I had not seen or heard that Strauss had said that on timepieces for comments.
Sorry, I have one more question then. So when we're talking about it, just full transparency, I'm Taylor with Queer Power Alliance. I've been going to testimonies and doing this, but I thank you all for putting this on Be Seattle and Solidarity Budget. One of the questions I have though is when there's so many different things to talk about in this budget, because we've got the we got public safety issues, we've got tenant housing issues, and then the mental health. Even though they passed that, they didn't pass it well. And then the other pieces that they put in around housing that to go to voters with the provision in it. There's just too many things to put in. So with the public hearing, that looks like it's even after the balancing package. Is there any real way to make an impact? Trying to find a polite word.
No, I mean, that is honestly a completely fair question, and full transparency, I think that is something pretty much everyone has been trying to figure out this year, in particular with this council. As we've seen with where we ended last year, I'd say it was also something we had been trying to figure out with the prior council as well. Like that is definitely like just an ongoing question, like with anyone, of like, what is the way to go and get an impact / move on that one? Tanya.
I was just gonna say, with that, it becomes also imperative that the coalitions or the groups that you're a part of, whether that's there's a section that's gonna focus on public safety or SPD's issues, if there's, people that are gonna focus on housing, that's where the coalition and the work for things like, Be Seattle is a part of the solidarity budget, and it's looking at where can we most effectively split our ability to speak, about issues and trust that our partners will take, like, okay, BJ is going to talk about this and so is going to talk about this. And because there are a ton of issues right now, this is when that idea of your coalitions and your groups that you're a part of, that you really have to lean on them, and everyone has to kind of step up to the plate to agree to let their voice be heard in specific areas so that those comments can be made in either groups or, if all of the people who got funding from tenant services last year got together and talked about how the 811,000 that they're reducing it, is detrimental. And here's why, then that's one thing where I would trust, let's say, BJ and a couple of the people from the solidarity budget to speak about public safety and SPD. Like, you just have to trust and work within these coalitions and organizations to get your voice heard. Are they going to listen? Who knows? That's their, sometimes it's like talking to a brick wall. But we either continue to fight and do it, or we sit back and whatever happens, we can't, it's kind of like if you don't vote, you can't complain kind of thing. If we don't make our voices heard, then we are part of the problem.
Which also I'd say one thing I'd add on that one, Tanya, is there's been an attempt going like at least the last year to really build a specific consensus as to what people in Seattle want. We've seen over the last few, well, pretty much most of this year, last few weeks in particular, like pretending that narrative has gotten much, much harder when they've been pushing stuff through. And it's been very, very clear that it is against the wishes of like what people actually want. So like, yes, it has still happened. Is there benefit in actually like delegitimizing, for lack of a better word, the council? I would say yes, of demonstrating like, hey, what is going through is actually like not what we want. And like y'all are gonna sit here and do this anyway, but you don't get to pretend that this is actually like the will of the people or what people want. So I would still say that there is some benefit in that part. And also one other note on here that I forgot to call out before is most other council business actually stops during budget. So like there won't be any committee meetings until after this happens. So until sometime in December. There will be regular full council meetings. Mostly that is stuff that has already passed out of committee. It's like on October 8th, there's a full council meeting where they're going to vote on 50K hiring bonuses for cops and surveillance tech for cops, and like fire code and paying bills. But that's then like paying bills is mostly just what those weekly council meetings will be. And then another item on the calendar piece is so council is required to have adopted or approved like a budget within 30 days of the end of the fiscal year. So there's effectively a cutoff, like a time barrier there of November 30th, December 1st, one of the two, as to when they would theoretically have had to have voted in favor of a balanced budget for next year. What happens if they miss that deadline? I have absolutely no idea. What would there would be in terms of like any actual consequences or pushback, but that does technically exist. So it would like constrain how much they can push it back on like this end towards the back. I mean, when they could have actually started this process, we know that the revenue that this is based off of is from July, so they could have started this months ago. Kate.
We talked about it in the chat, but I just wanted to say it for folks who are maybe not paying attention in the chat. The SDCI is presenting, and they're doing it on Friday at 2 p.m. So that would be a great meeting for folks who don't want to see tenant services, which almost completely funds B Seattle, and funds, Queer Power Alliance and the Tenants Union and the Tenant Law Center and Housing Justice Project and Solid Ground and a bunch of other organizations. If you don't want to see that massively defunded, that would be a great meeting to speak up. Just wanted to note that before we move on.
No, also, and I'll thank you so much, whoever caught that, and my apologies. I should have double checked the schedule before this one. So thank you so, so much for catching that and correcting me on that one. And then one other item on with the budget process, before we sort of start diving into a budget, is you then have to try to make sure that the city actually spends the money that goes to it the following year. The city departments, they report to the mayor. There have been times where stuff's been funded that just hasn't been spent. There were street sinks back in 2020 was a big example, and participatory budgeting pretty much ever since 2021. So just that this is something where once that sort of we pushed, there's a vote or actually even this year, we saw it with student mental health. Like even once there is that vote, there is then have to remember like the following year, we're not done. We have to keep making sure that they go and actually do spend that money that was allocated to them. Cool. So now starting to actually like talk about and look through a budget. So in terms of how detailed is a budget, so for the most part, departments are budgeted at the budget control or budget summary level. These are the exact same thing. They switch. I have no idea why. It's really annoying. And you can sort of see a couple examples of what those departments are, or BCLs, BSLs are in a few departments. Theoretically, a council is giving the department money at that level, and the department can then do some sort of moving around within them. And cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start actually like looking through SDCI's budget from 2023. Complete with a bunch of screenshots, using 2023 versus trying to do this year's live, because I feel like actually like doing a live look at stuff is just begging for like IT issues, and that's just no one's friend. So each budget section, it starts off with like an overview of the department that runs at least half a page or longer. It's them writing PR for what they do. You'll just absolutely don't care. If it's a department you're not familiar with and want to read about it, cool, but it doesn't really impact anything. What you then come into after that is it gives you like a quick snapshot of where money for the department's coming from. Like so for SDCI, we can see it's largely coming from general fund, it's largely coming from non-general fund with about, what are we gonna call that? Like we'll say 9% roughly coming from general fund. And then there's an overview. But before we start getting into that overview, since I wasn't familiar with SDCI before putting this together, I got like really curious when I saw that. So like scrolling down further, there's then this like budget summary by fund that's within there. So you can then see, okay, of this like 102 million, here's the split between different funds as to where it's coming from. So it's coming from this fund, 48,100, construction and inspections, and here's just sort of like a write-up. It's largely like fees for construction and inspection fees is the main money that's coming into SDCI. But I was also kind of curious. So of this like 9.6 million of general fund, like, well, what in SDCI does that go to? So further on, you also get like this expenditure summary that breaks it out between those BSLs, BCLs, and you can see like, okay, of general fund within SDCI, it's going to compliance. Yeah, largely compliance. A decent chunk's also going to policy, safety, and support, and some really small amounts up in inspections and land services. And then here's pretty much like the write-up, like what is the compliance one. So it's going into just, yeah, the buildings are up to code compliance on that one. And this is also going to be, yeah, we'll get to that later, but this is also where like renter programs are going to be residing. So that was just sort of like a random dive because as I started going through here, like this was the second thing and I got curious. I was like, oh, well, what's this other funding piece? For the most part, though, as you come in, you'll next go to like an overview that's just more narrative, which is useful because this will talk about changes versus the prior year. But the much nicer item is what's after that. It gives you this pretty decent table of breaking out what are the incremental changes. Now, I will say what is annoying is it only calls out something that's like an incremental change versus the prior year budget. So anything that was like in this prior number, this 112 million, that's not changing, we don't get a ton of information on. But for the stuff that is changing, we get it split out as what's the dollar impact on the current year and what's the impact on the number of positions, FTEs, which is stands for full-time equivalents. So it's someone that's working 40 hour a week job is 1 FTE, a 20-hour a week job is 0.5 FTEs. It's also how you can have like half a person on that. And you start off with like these three categories of baseline, proposed, operating. Because remember, everything that the mayor suddenly wants to do is purely a proposal. It is not binding at all. And then there's technical. Baseline piece, honestly, don't care too much. Really what shows up in baseline is what's called standard cost adjustments, which are changes from existing contracts. So if there's a labor contract, like what should we call it? Electrical workers, any contractual raises built in or like cost of living adjustments would be up there as like just one of those as an adjustment to like their standard cost changes, or SDCI, they're, I don't know, they're like renting software. Well, yeah, they've got like a lease on a building, lease goes up by 2% every year. That would be as like one of these things. If it's just baseline, their cost contracts, just the changes there. So just we don't need to take much of a look into them. Similarly, these technical items, not ones that really are worth spending the bulk of time on. Because really, if it's a technical adjustment, this means that the legislation related to it or any action has like already happened. So like they may have added, for this one, we'll look at it, but these could be things like, oh, they added a position last year and now it's adding like the funding for it, because that's able to happen. So just the reason that these, like, not saying tech things showing up in technical are necessarily good, but because sort of the legislation has already sailed, trying to fight them is a much bigger fight. So the operating is where like the big changes are and where really a bunch of like the opportunity is to try and push on things, on like what they're trying to do in terms of reading into that to see what's going on. So example, just once we, after this table, we get like short little write-ups on each of these bullet points. So like for the technical change, costs are shifting because the program managers thing is shifting. So it's just going to ongoing SDCI like in a different fund. So again, legislation's already passed. It's just a short example of what it is. So some of those proposed changes, two that I want to take a look at, because they did this really fun thing of like, oh, you added a position. So someone's now like a new worker in your job, into your department, but no dollars. How's that happen? Because people don't work for free. So I got really curious on that. And so it's like, okay, so it's, it adds a new position authority, and it's transferring existing budget to different accounts to cover this. So it's like, okay, there were some existing dollars floating around somewhere that are now being used to cover this. What you can already figure out, I'm guessing a lot of you have the same question of like, oh, there's existing dollars. What were those existing dollars? What had they been covering before? So things we can try to question, get follow-up information on, but that level of detail that isn't necessarily like built in there. So we know some dollars some dollars were shifted here. We don't get the visibility though of like where they actually came from. So these are two changes. These are things council approved back in 2023. Mostly wanted to have them here because they're a really good example of an ongoing item versus a one-time item, like right next to each other for one screenshot. And what wanted to highlight is when something comes up and it's an ongoing, you don't see the budget, the detail breakout on it again. So for this guy for eviction legal defense, so this is ongoing. So the next year, that's just baked into this number. If it's still just 450K, it will not see this. The only way this would be like broken out here in these changes is if there's a proposal to add additional dollars to it or take dollars to it. So once it's flagged as ongoing, it's in this number, and a lot of that detail disappears in future years. Conversely, the one-time guys, it's reversals of one-time you don't see in future years. Like, so for this guy, for rental assistance, since this was one time, the following year, it effectively gets to go away without having to be called out as a cut. it would just show up in this lump sum dollar amount thing of reversal of one-time items from prior years. The only way you'd really see it on here is if they brought it back. And they'd also get to brag about it being like a new program. So if they brought back that if they brought back that rental assistance the next year, it would be here as like proposed operating $1 million rental assistance. So at first glance, like that'd look cool, fun, like yay, new rental assistance dollars. But then like, oh no, it's the status quo. It's just one time that they add it again. So that is a way, like calling something ongoing is a great way to hide like crappy items because they only have to get called out once. And calling something like one time is honestly, it's a good way to hide cuts in future years because they just sit in that like bucket. And it's potentially a good way to like every single year make it look like you're doing something like good because you get to call it out if you bring the same thing back at the same dollars. It's one time. And with like budget adjustments, like not everything needs the same level of research or looking into like some from a really sort of short look at, you can be like, cool, that's good, or wow, that's terrible, which doesn't mean like couldn't be improved, but you don't necessarily need to keep doing more research on that. And some items, like I kind of hate saying this, uh, the dollar amounts are honestly just so small that it's not really worth looking at. You know, we talked about there's that 9 week time frame, and that's 9 weeks of even like having to dig through everything. So you can only fight on so many things in that much time. Like as an example, last year Strauss did a really, really shitty, really bad item or multiple bad items. One of them was for $20,000. Like I absolutely positively hated this item, but I was also like, there's so much other stuff that like 20,000 just isn't worth it. So you'll see a list of adjustments, like a big list like this, and there'll be some things where you're like, look, I don't like it, might even really dislike it, but do I want to prioritize spending like a bunch of time chasing $15,000 on something or fighting for $15,000 on this one item? Or do I want to spend all of that on like a $3 million item? So I know it's really annoying to be like, have to let something really crappy like kind of slide, but sadly it happens. Yeah. And then like, what's the detail otherwise for like ongoing items? It's this. So once something is ongoing and it's not getting changed, it's just sitting in the exact same BCL. This is what you'll get. You'll get like compliance. Here's the breakout of the expenditures on that one. And that's sort of what you get. You don't get a ton of info once something gets flagged as ongoing. So brings up the big question, where else is it possible to go and get information? So prior year budgets are actually like a phenomenal source of information. And one thing I will give Seattle credit for, they're pretty easily accessible online. I've got a link in this presentation. I think it's on like the last slide, unfortunately, so I can't not gonna be able to find it right now. But it's the Seattle Budget Office's website. It has every year's budget going back at least 9 years. I think it goes back to like 2009. So you could go back a ways to look for like anything that was once ongoing that you now know is like then baked into that number. Or you can also go back to just the prior year and look at, okay, what are a bunch of the one-time items? So we know that we had like, yeah, we know we had 4.9 million of one-time items that we're reversing from the prior year. Here's 3 items that combined are 2.4. So this is about half of what those one-time items were of just these 3 items. So we know, okay, this comes down to like, how do we feel about a virtual permitting counter? Because this apparently went away. Or is it just on this one, it was like, okay, this was just software deployment, so probably fine for that to go away. How do we care about like probate and history fee conversion? Again, these 3 items are probably ones we don't care about too much, but this would be one where, for this year, you'd see this guy go in there, the rent funding for rental assistance. So you will find items that you like do potentially care about more from the prior year of like, oh, there was funding here last year that's not coming back this year. And they're not having to call it out as a cut because they called it one time, but it is a reduction in funding. Like it's less money going to this thing. Potential other source is other sections of the budget. Sometimes things can show up in sort of surprising places. And this doesn't mean you have to like go and scour every single like department of the every single budget section, but sometimes it's worth opening up like finance and administrative services or finance general and just doing like a quick control F for like a couple terms that you think might be a couple terms, like a couple things you might be curious on. Like that's actually how I found out that indigent defense jail and public defender services for Seattle are actually located in finance and administrative services. So I was like kind of curious and just sort of flipping through there one time. So I was like, this is money. What's in this department? I was like, oh wow, that's where our jail costs live. So for that sort of section on like current year, real quick, like going through what actually is the PDF for a department, gonna see if there are any questions on that one. We're sort of going more into like what are other places to go and look to get information on a department. Groovy. I'm not seeing anything in the chat on that one either. Okay. So we just talked about looking at prior year budgets as a great source of information as to what's going on in this one that's either mushed together in that reversal of one-time budget items or is ongoing funding that's not actually getting called out anymore. So another great place to look is central staff memos. So central staff it's a nonpartisan group. They work for city council, but they don't work for any specific like council member. They work for just sort of like the institution of the Seattle Council. Like they do analysis for them. They do a lot of drafting of legislation. They do a lot of the actual like running and doing stuff. And so they do memos on each department every year. They'll also like do memos on proposed legislation. And those memos on each department's budget can provide a lot of information. Like they can do a good overview of like, okay, what's history of like what's been going on with this department over the last few years. They'll also have more detail on some things than are in the budget. Like if they decide to talk about something, like we mentioned those, yeah, nope, on some more slide. Yeah, we mentioned these two positions where it's like, oh, we just know that dollars were shifted, but we don't know where the dollars came from. If central staff decided to talk about them, that can show up in the memo where they'll talk about like, oh, funding for, I forgot the new position titles were, but funding for new position X, this came from what, program Z that was sitting around for whatever reason. Like that's a level of information that can come up in here. So they'll also then have what are called like issue identification, which are things that they think are issues that the council should consider and potentially take action on during their budget deliberations. And for these, there'll often be even like more information on that. And definitely not saying agree with everything they flag as issue identification, both in terms of not saying that they flag everything that's up for consideration or that we think would be an issue, because they absolutely don't, or that we agree with what they do come up with, but just there's a lot of information that they do provide that is useful to go and look through on that one. Also, like other places to find information, there are department presentations, which, as Kate mentioned, the SDCI will be presenting Friday, so in 2 days at that meeting. Department presentations aren't usually as good for additional money, or I'm sorry, additional information that is not in the budget, because again, they're written by the department, kind of trying to advertise itself and justify itself getting as much money as possible. So they're not great. They can be useful. So I don't have a screenshot from last budget cycles, because the last budget cycle, they did not do a presentation for SDCI. It's typically not every department does a presentation. So, but this year there is Friday, SDCI is presenting. You can get some information from there. Also, like, comrades, like, you are absolutely positively not the only person like looking at this. So talk to other people you know that are looking at things, because they might have they could catch something you missed. You could have caught something they missed, or you guys could have caught the same thing, but just sort of both been like, I'm not sure exactly what this is, and just sort of try to talk it over that way. And this goes with like both, maybe Tanya was talking about it, different people sort of have different areas of expertise. So you can be like, hey, this is a transportation item. That's outside of my wheelhouse, but I know someone from Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, or I know someone from Seattle, from Whose Streets Are Streets. Or at the same time, it can be like, this is SDCI, this is my wheelhouse, but I'm not sure exactly how I feel on this. And you guys know people from D Seattle who are also looking at that. There's also in that there is some good reporting in Seattle with people that actually do go and look through the budget itself, versus just press releases that like the mayor and council send out. I'll specifically note Publicola is often really good on that one, of like looking through the budget. The Stranger can also be pretty solid on that one. Same with the Urbanist, is mostly transportation, but also pretty good. So like, not an exhaustive list, but there is like, that is another source, of other people that are actually going and looking through the budget. You also do get committee meetings during the year. If you're able to sort of listen into those at times, because people will bring up, you can get a sense of what are priorities that people are going to sort of potentially be putting in there, that they intend to have or want to have in the budget. And that can potentially, when they're passing legislation that comes up, that then creates like a technical change for later on. So we actually, an example of this from today, so not as far back in the year, but happened today, so it's really sort of front of mind. Councilmember Moore, which I think we all definitely have thoughts on, mentioned that she thinks that rental assistance is a big area of need in the budget. That was kind of the extent of it, but just a sign of like, okay, so Councilmember Moore might be trying to do something on that side. So just something is like, okay, you'll get an idea from like when someone comes up of like, that's potentially going to be something they're looking at. Converse, and also you've got like Bob Kettle, that everything is a noun, a verb, and public safety, where it's like, okay, this is going to be, everything is like criminal and carceral as possible, is going to become, or anything he puts forward is going to be criminal and carceral. Like, we can kind of go and expect that one. Other sources are like actually other cities, which sounds kind of weird, because it is, different cities and all, but like a lot of policy items do shift and move like across cities and get repeated. So if you're ever talking to someone in like a different city, and they might mention like, it could be the good thing where they mention something really cool in their city. You're like, ooh, we can look into like, how would we go about funding that, putting that into our budget? Or you could hear about something and be like, huh, I wonder if that exists in our city. And you just sort of then have that like breadcrumb starting you going on like a search for something. Public disclosure requests, honestly, they're not really useful of like for during the budget season. Budget season is 9 weeks. You're not getting much in the way of public disclosure requests like turned around that fast. like they can be really useful for like other times outside of budget, but just during the budget itself, not so much. Any quick questions on that, or not even necessarily quick, but any questions on that or anything else, or?
I just had a couple of comments of stuff that was happening in the chat. That it was noteworthy at when you were talking about central staff and their role in informing the council members and the public about the impacts of some things, that Sarah Nelson fired the head of central staff in January. And then more recently, council member Moore had central staff scrub the soap bill before making it public. So I dropped some links to those things in the chat, but also like understanding the context of like where we're at politically. And then when you mentioned the rental assistance, somebody asked about them cutting it. And so I just wanted to clarify that right now we only have the mayor's proposed budget, and council is going to propose probably a lot of changes to it. So it's going to get worse in some places and maybe better in some others. Who knows? So we're just like we're dealing from the bottom right now. And since I'm still talking, I also wanted to say, told everyone to show up for public comment 2 p.m. on Friday, but actually there won't be public comment at the 2 p.m. meeting. You're gonna have to give public comment at 9:30 a.m. And they'll be doing the presentation at 2 p.m.
Yep, cool. Thank you on that, Kate. And also, so one quick item with that. So the presentation it'll definitely still be 2 p.m. Like Strauss was talking about, like stuff that is set for after 2 p.m. will be after 2 p.m. They're not gonna like move stuff early up if like they're getting through other things quicker on that one. And yeah, thank you for mentioning just the 9:30 piece. And also like with central staff on that one, so even under last year, so like while they do technically work for the council and are nominally nonpartisan, so the person that was Greg Doss, who was the central staff member that handled a lot, like pretty much all things public safety under prior council, he's still there, slightly different role. He used to work for SPD. So while they are still great sources of information and aren't theoretically working for anyone, like a specific council member, you are absolutely right, and this is like worth calling out on. These are not necessarily groups we are always, or people we are always going to agree with. They'll just have good information at times that's worth like looking into. Yeah, I remember finding that out about us. I was like, oh, this explains why you're always so like defensive of SPD, even though you theoretically work for the council. Oh yeah, and also what other item Kate mentioned that absolutely to like emphasize. Yeah, all that has been put forward is proposed. The council is free to completely ignore absolutely everything the mayor has put forward. They are under like no obligation to go with any single proposal he has put forward. They, the legislation controls the budget and has power over the purse, so they have full authority on that. So there is lots of room for things to change. Speaking of things can change, come up with like what are different items that we can fight for during the budget process. So the biggest one, definitely also like the most impactful one, is to actually like reallocate money and or like add remove positions. Like this is actual dollars going somewhere, like the dollar impact is there, like that's the biggest pro, like it has that impact, like adding rental assistance, adding tenant services, all that, like getting money added there, reallocated for honestly some of the like really crappy stuff in the budget of like, hey, what if in funds, we took some of the millions or more we want to give to sweeps and actually use that money to keep people housed. What a crazy idea that would be. So you've got that big pro, like money gets moved, so it has the biggest impact. It is honestly kind of the hardest one to do. because there can be the big push on that one. And then the two other warnings of like the city technically can then not spend it following year, and departments can also then overspend. So if you're ever pushing on something like get a bad program, like its funding cut, depending on who the department is, they can overspend with potentially little to no consequences. Like not to try to talk people out of, like that's still the biggest one to go and push for, like the most impactful, but there are sort of those two caveats on it. The next thing sort of I'd say that comes up is a proviso, which everyone's probably heard it. Like it pretty much restricts money to like a specific item, or just says like it can't be spent until like council does a future vote to free up the cash. And this will happen like, okay, this specific yeah, sorry, like the ones I can think of are all cop related. You can tell where I spend a lot of time. Like two recent provisos were one like tying up some funds of SPD's technology budget that they had to use it to spend on Trulio, or another saying like, hey, SPD couldn't spend its salary savings from its inflated staffing plan without a future council vote. That's a lot easier, all in all, to get passed than actually like going and moving the money today, because it like passes the buck to the future. It's like, oh, a council member can be like, I don't want to say that this money can't be spent right now, so I'll just say it's tied up in a proviso, so maybe in the future I can potentially not spend it there. Again, it's past the buck. It also means you end up having to like keep pressure on much longer. And there's some legal arguments that departments don't actually have to be bound by provisos. Like if it's in their budget and they think the proviso will be lifted, they can potentially spend anyway. Laws aren't real. Sorry. Don't have like a better one to say on that one. Like it's somewhat dubious as to whether, or it's depending on who did that, would really depend on whether or not there were consequences, is I think the best way to put it. Finally, there's statement of legislative intent, aka a SLI. People have probably heard that term, and that's really just a report. Really easy to go and like get. Like the Revenue Stabilization Task Force from last year was the result of a SLI of saying, which is, we want a report showing options for progressive revenue. So easy because it's a report, and that report, like not to be completely dismissive, like that can be used as like sort of building the case for future legislation down the road. Problem is it is still just a report. And apparently the following year, council has the option to like throw out any slides that it doesn't like. I actually learned that one at the start of this year when they threw out a couple of slides, like looking into moving OPA out of SPD. That was a slide that passed in last year's budget that got tossed at the start of this year. And a note, like not all budget years are the same. So we are technically on a biannual budget where it's supposed to be budgeting for a 2-year cycle. So we just started that. We're at the first year of a biannual budget. So the budget that's currently being discussed it's going to be the adopted budget for 2025. And then it'll be like the endorsed budget for 2026. And then next year, budget will just be making adjustments to 2026. It won't be looking at 2027 only. It'll just be adjusting that second year of the 2-year cycle. And those adjustments in year 2 are supposed to be minor adjustments, like things that were unforeseen when the budget was set a year prior. This isn't a rule. I don't know exactly what to call it. Like, it's not a rule. It's maybe not even a suggestion, because it's really, that can be disregarded at will. And it often is when council members want to actually bring in stuff that's like their pet project. But one sort of word of warning, they will then also sometimes use it as a justification for not doing something they don't want to do. A former budget chair may have done a bit of that, of using mid-biennium as an excuse not to bring forward certain things last year. And that's also not unique to Seattle, that sort of 2-year cycle. So it comes up in other times. And in addition to like that, midway through each year, actually more than midway, because it's like late July, early August, there's a mid-year supplemental budget, which is supposed to be just, well, it's just changes to the current year. So last month we had changes to this year's budget. Uh, and that's supposed to be like, hey, changes based on like updated revenue forecast, or revenue receipts. So in, what was it? Yeah, it was 2023, I think, when Taylor Swift came to town. That was actually a massive windfall for the admissions tax, which funds the arts department. So like at the mid-year supplemental budget, they had like a few $1 million extra because of revenue from like Taylor Swift concerts to go and spend. And that was like a legit item, like the revenue forecast changed, the incoming revenue changed, so like adjustments during the year. So it's like supposed to be for things like that. Um, or for things that like would have been completely and totally unforeseeable at the start of the year. Because things do happen, like, hey, a bridge fell down. We didn't know that was going to happen. That kind of changes things, and we have to be able to like shift our budget for that one. Uh, However, again, that whole like only unforeseen item isn't actually a rule. Uh, and it's a time of year when people aren't necessarily paying a lot of attention. So council can use it to just like sneak some bad stuff in when, without people really noticing so much. One thing they've done a lot of is like they'll add headcount to SPD and like, well, the SPD in particular at that mid-year and claim like it's budget neutral because it's being paid from out of slush fund. And then a month later, they're like, oh, this is now a technical adjustment to give the dollars to fund this position. Almost like what we saw, find it here. Yeah, like something like this unreinforced masonry program manager. We saw like this wasn't that, but they could have done it then. Like that's an example of what it would have looked like if at mid-year budget they're like, oh, we're gonna add this position and we've got like 50K of savings from something else. So we'll just add the position that pays for it. And then at the next budget, they have to actually like add in the real dollars. Kate.
There was a question in the chat that says, if I'm trying to get the council to increase a certain item's budget amount by $100,000 to $200,000, and that doesn't happen this fall during the public process, is it worth it to continue trying throughout 2025, or should I wait until the start of 2026?
Absolutely keep on it throughout 2025. Because cool. Actually, this one works fine enough. The budget process, for 2026, next year's budget process starts on January 1st, maybe January 2nd, because New Year's Day is a holiday in the US. Like the departments are absolutely going and looking into that the whole time. So if like early pressure is always good, to keep that one going. Also, a person mentioned that it was a 100, 200K item. Depending on what it is, like if you've gotten that in someone's ear enough, depending on what happens with revenue forecasts, there's also potential for that to get pushed, worked through even as like a mid-year supplemental budget item. So there's absolutely worth trying to do that push like the entire year. And just like thinking about like budget is the entire year. It is not just this 9-week period on that part. So absolutely would be worth trying to push on it like the entire year. And also with that mid-year piece, so I'm just going to assume that it's $200,000 per year, like just entirely making up numbers. It's like you can still push, or even at mid-year in like July, August, push for that still like 200K amount. Because even if they don't spend it the whole that year, it would then just be rolled over to next year. So the dollars would already be in there and allocated. Like you wouldn't need to like scale that down to just half of whatever I said. I can't remember what number I said. So yeah, that's actually like a very good thing of like not to assume, not to think of budget as just October and November, but it is pretty much a full year process on that. Yeah, it's a full year process. And then, yeah, some useful links for people. And any other questions? I think that's everything that I had. I know it's kind of dense and can seem a bit intimidating, but like it's not as bad as it seems. Like once you actually sort of do go and start like looking through it, and like sort of the false sense of urgency that the city creates by having this limited to like such a brief period does a lot to sort of create that system. So if you think of like with that other item of like, hey, I'm not necessarily going to get that this year, but like this is a longer term structural change that I want to keep pushing on. So I know it's going to take like a bit of time, and just realizing like this isn't something I have to all get done in like 3 weeks. That also makes it a lot easier because you then get time to like, talk with other people more, like look at prior budgets and also just like get familiar with it. Um, and yeah, so this last thing, like, and always never ever be afraid to like ask other people like if you a question if you run into something on the budget because there's weird stuff. It's intentionally vague, um, but it's worth looking into. And again, they don't want you looking at it, so it's also really worth looking at it for that reason.
Thank you so much, BJ. This was so informative. And I also wanted to note for the folks that are still here, B Seattle, like we're tiny. We're not going to be able to dive into the budget as deeply, especially not for every department. It is massive. And that's part of the reason that we're part of the solidarity budget, because we as a community have to cover this. We can't rely on one or two people to figure everything out. We have to rely on each other. So we're obviously like paying the most attention to the renter issues, but we are plugged in with the rest of the stuff. So if you follow us on social media, if you get our emails, which you will if you didn't before because you registered for this workshop, we'll keep you up to date. We'll keep you up to date with the solidarity budget stuff. And I also just wanted to shine a light on like tenant services specifically and like the risks that we're facing. Tanya, would you mind sharing the presentation again? There were a couple of things that we flagged that are really dangerous, and also a little insulting. So within the SDCI budget, they are planning on removing some of the previous one-time things. $1 million for rental assistance, and as you noted, council member Moore seemed interested in maybe putting that back. The council as a whole has said before that they really support rental assistance, rather than doling it out to organizations that help renters. They'd rather just give it to the renters themselves, which okay. So that also the removal of the $50,000 to convene a tenant work group. This was something that B Seattle and the Seattle Renter Organizing Council that we host really fought pretty hard for to get into the budget last year, and and the mayor's office never released those funds. So those funds were supposed to go to a work group that would write legislation to create a separate Office of Rental Housing Standards that would really fight for renters in the way that the Office of Labor Standards fights for workers. Because right now it's housed under SDCI. They serve two masters, with receiving a lot of their funding from developer fees. And they also aim for voluntary compliance, which means like when renters report major issues, if the landlord eventually fixes them, they're like, cool, well, that's done. So there's no restitution for renters for living in horrible conditions, for landlords taking advantage of them and breaking the laws. They don't get in trouble. They'd have to go to court for that. And so those are like two things that we planned. And then also a big chunk of tenant services, they are taking from, instead of being funded by the general fund, they want to take it from Jumpstart. So these funds should be going to affordable housing and equitable development initiative. And they're gutting these things that like renters absolutely need, that we need in this city to thrive, and they're basically pitting it against each other. And then also noteworthy, they're cutting $811,000 from the tenant services grant, which I don't have it in my notes the exact amount. Tanya might know it. But basically, like, all of the tenant services grants combined are like $2.7 million.
So last year, the budget for tenant services was 2,570,000. That included eviction protections and right to counsel. So with the 811,000 being gone this year, that's 1.759 thousand that's available. And of that, 527,000 is strictly for rental assistance. So that leaves us with basically 1.2 to be split between tenant services like B Seattle and eviction protection right to counsel.
So, and there's a lot of organizations who receive some level of funding. So we are fighting for scraps. So B Seattle, like, our entire operating budget from what the city covers, and then like everything else is like less than 2 rookie cop salaries. And so for us as a small organization to receive significantly less funding or be defunded by the city of Seattle would be quite likely the end of B Seattle. Like, you know, we would love to keep it going in theory, but like we're a staff of 2, Tanya and me. What you see is what you get. And you know, we're salaried employees. We are paid the state minimum for exempt salaries. Like, we're already on a shoestring budget. And we had to get funds to make up the difference in what SDCI doesn't pay us. So this is like a huge deal for B Seattle, and also for renters in general, because we are part of like a pretty small group who do education and also sound the alarm when there are things happening to renters, and organize for renter protections, which are at extremely high risk of being overturned. And Councilmember Moore, it's been rumored for months that she is planning on putting forward legislation to tweak renter protections. She says she's not going to explicitly roll them back, but we'll see what tweaking them looks like. But decided to postpone it until next year. And it's kind of pretty clear to us that she decided to do it after tenant services are defunded. So like the tenant advocates and the people who are really reaching communities who don't pay close attention to City Hall will not have the funding and ability to respond adequately. Sorry if I sound stressed. I'm a renter myself, and so this is like the loss of my livelihood and also potentially like my housing. And I think that I'm not the only one like experiencing panic over that. So Tanya, can you go to the next slide, please? Oop, did it hop forward? There was a, no. Take action. There we go. So there are going to be a bunch of action alerts coming in the next few weeks. The solidarity budget historically has been like incredible about putting forward like talking points for public comment and draft emails that you can tweak to make your own. But we want to get everyone off to a running start, and we have like both a self-interest and a community interest in making sure that renters are still protected. So we are asking the folks here to please just take a moment to send an email to City Council about changes that you would like to see in the 2025 Seattle budget that would better protect you and your renter community. So just a little bit of like how to write this email. Just be clear and direct. State your concerns about the budget and how it affects your community, specifically calling out priorities like funding and investing more deeply in tenant services, drastically reducing the bloated police budget and investing in various services to help renters, and preserving jumpstart funds for community investments, not budget gaps. Those are just our suggestions. BJ like really covered a whole lot here that you could say, and we want you to focus on your own priorities, and then personalize your message. So share how the budget decisions will impact you personally, or your neighbors or your family. Stories resonate with council members. And then focus on values. Emphasize that the budget reflects the city's values, and encourage council to align spending with community needs. So be assertive, use strong, clear language to demand action, and avoid vague or passive phrases. And then keep it concise. Short and focused emails are more likely to be read. Tanya, can you go to the next slide, please? So I drafted like a really just a pretend email from a renter who, I don't know, might have engaged with B Seattle at some point. And if you're, and I also put, like I said, we have some self-interests here. Put just a couple of like past things that we've done that might have helped renters, or could help renters in the future if we were to continue with these types of workshops. And it says, Dear Seattle City Council, please prioritize fully funding tenant services in the 2025 budget. I'm a low-income single parent living in the Central District. B Seattle's Building Tenant Power workshop with the Seattle Office for Civil Rights transformed my relationship with my landlord and likely prevented self-eviction. I've also shared the tools I learned through their workshops and meetings with friends to help them get repairs done. Renter education and organizing empowers entire communities by giving people resources to support each other, not just those directly served. Cutting these services will worsen the housing crisis. Sincerely, Janet Snakehole. So this is just a very hypothetical like thing that you could say that specifically ties into like a way that you were helped by tenant services. And this doesn't have to be like I said, we have our own self-interest, but we're trying to empower renters. So whatever really touches you, and it might not be our stuff, but that's okay. We're setting you up, and just kind of remember this like vibe. That's specific, that it's short, and that it plays into like the vision that you want to see. You don't want to see a worsening housing crisis. You do want to see community supported, and this is one way that you think that council can do it. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add or any comments?
Actually, one thing I would say, like, don't stress on making it perfect. Like, the email that actually gets sent is so much better than the one that like you just sort of self-censor because like you're constantly trying to like revise. Like, good enough totally works for this. Like, same anytime you give public comment or go to give, like, don't stress about it like trying to be like the most perfect one. Like, just good enough is totally cool.
Oh my God, BJ, that is the best the best statement, and something that like I think I often get hung up on myself. I'll be like sitting there like rewriting my public comment statement up until it's my chance to speak. And you are totally right that like they're really just looking for like the ask and the vibe. They're not looking for like the exact language that proves that you're worthy of being listened to.
But this isn't like none of that was to imply that anything like anyone comes up with won't be absolutely phenomenal anyway, but just like, yeah, don't stress.
Okay, we're I'm going to send out an action alert to our mailing list of Seattle folks about those alarms within SDCI's budget that will impact renters, regardless of whether or not it impacts B Seattle. Like there is absolutely no way that defunding tenant services is not going to impact renters. The other thing that's worth noting is most of us here who receive funds from the tenant services grant are directed to guide renters into calling the Renting in Seattle helpline or reporting issues that they are unable to solve to the city so that code compliance can get involved. And so at SDCI's presentation to the city council back in February, they said that the volume of calls from the previous year had gone up 40%. And we are still in a housing crisis. And so we can only assume that these calls have continued to rise. Wait times for inspections, they're triaged, but they, I think, averaged at about 3 weeks. So when we're looking at defunding tenant services, we are looking, maybe it will take people longer to be diverted into making those calls, but they will have longer wait times. It will be less responsive. Like it's going to be like a real pretty disastrous effect. And SDCI will probably have less capacity to deal with it as well. So, but we're only at the beginning of budget season. We have like 9 more weeks to fight. And so with that, it's still a little early. We scheduled this workshop until 8, but I don't know about y'all. I am exhausted. So Tanya, can you play us out?
We know you could've stayed home, just cried and cussed. Mail your guns go off if it's time to bust. Mail, they tanks have time to rust. They got the armies turning bullets into gold. They got the hookers turning tricks into cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the
I'm
cold.
rocking out, but everyone is gone.